Welcome into another edition of Building the Board. In this episode, we're going to talk about the offensive line, a position group with top-tier athletes, and we'll talk about how much the Cowboys really need to focus on the offensive line in this draft. I'm Danny Sarek, and I'm joined now by Kyle Yeomans. Kyle, come join me up here at the big board.
Got to build it, right?
This is a fun position group to talk about, the offensive line. This is an area the Cowboys struggled in last year in quarterback protection as well as in the run game. A large part of that because of injuries. Both starting tackles, Tyron Smith and Lyle Collins, were out last year due to a neck and hip injury, respectively. Kyle, we know that both of them are expected to be ready to go at the start of the season. How does that recovery process for them affect the way the Cowboys should draft an offensive lineman?
I think it affects it in a tremendous fashion because those are the cornerstones of your offensive line outside of Zach Martin. You look at Lyle Collins and, of course, what Smith brought last year, it was disappointing, and it didn't allow this offense to really be exactly what you expected it to be. Of course, Dak Prescott's injury threw a big wrench into that as well, but you could also maybe even argue that if the offensive line was as healthy as it was supposed to be coming out of training camp, then maybe Dak Prescott wouldn't have pressed enough and wouldn't have found a way to get into that situation. So there's a lot of things that kind of rely on that. The health of Collins and Smith moving forward are enough to maybe keep the Cowboys in the market of shopping for an offensive lineman up at the top of the draft. But I think at the moment, at least you're set for 2021. It's really the future that you're going to start looking at.
It's a great year to have a top 10 pick for the Cowboys because there are a few offensive linemen who are phenomenal athletes, and there's a chance that at least one of them will be available at 10. Who are those top offensive linemen this year?
Well, of course, the wishful thinking is Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle out of Oregon, who's just about 20 years old, one of the younger prospects in the entire draft. He took the 2020 season off. Actually, all three of these guys took, except for Wyatt Davis, took the 2020 season off. But these are guys that you're going to look at. Rashawn Slater, who, of course, we're going to hear about a little bit later on from our very own David Hellman. But Sewell is the top of the draft class. He's somebody that, of course, the Cowboys are going to certainly look at, maybe if he falls, because he is a guy that can come in and start immediately. You could say the same thing about Rashawn Slater. Then Wyatt Davis is kind of at the top of a very poor interior offensive line class. This is a group that isn't as deep as I think you would want it to be, or at least is not as top-heavy as you'd want it to be. It's really Davis, Elijah Vera Tucker out of USC. That's pretty much the extent of where this interior offensive line class goes.
With this Cowboys injury-prone offensive line, when you look at Sewell and Slater, how confident are you that they could be ready to go day one to start of their NFL career?
Well, that's exactly what you would want out of a 10th overall pick, but they're both really ready to go, if you ask me, because one thing with Rashawn Slater, he can pop inside, he can play the guard spot. He could also start out there at tackle if maybe some injuries were to arise, which would take some pressure, I think, off of the rest of those offensive linemen. And then if you're Penei Sewell, he would be a starting tackle at any position, any team almost in the entire NFL. So if he comes to the Cowboys, it'll be interesting on how he fits. He's not as apt to playing the guard spot, but he's somebody that, of course, is talented enough to be able to start early on. Both of those guys will be a starter whenever the day one, week one comes around in 2021.
If Sewell or Slater are not available, or if the Cowboys decide to go a completely different route with the 10th overall pick, who are some day 2 or 3 names that you like?
Well, I really do like a couple of these guys, and I think Liam Eichenberg really steals the show from Notre Dame as somebody who could be in that sweet spot of the Cowboys right around pick 44. This is a big, hefty offensive tackle, somebody who may be a little bit of a project. You asked me about Slater and Sewell and how they could start day one. Eichenberg may not be ready to start day one in the NFL, but he's somebody that could definitely have a very long, fruitful career in the NFL. And then I really like Trey Smith as well out of Tennessee. You talk about a big body as well. He's athletic. He's very fundamental and somebody that I think an NFL team is going to find maybe even as a bit of a sleeper. I originally had maybe a day 3 grade on him, but I think he's definitely good enough to go day 2 at this point.
Let's get a closer look at Rashawn Slater of Northwestern. We're going to bring in David Hellman, DallasCowboys.com writer. David, what can you tell us about Slater?
Thanks, y'all. And like you alluded to, we know the Cowboys need defense, but if there is an offensive player in this draft worth getting really excited about, Rashawn Slater is absolutely one of them. A Texas native, as a matter of fact. I know he played in Chicago, but from Sugar Land, Texas, Rashawn Slater, an opt-out, but I promise you there is plenty to like about this tape. And the thing I like the most, like Kyle alluded to a minute ago, is the versatility. You are going to see this guy play all over the offensive line. So yeah, Tyron Smith, Lyle Collins, maybe they're healthy for 2021, but guess what? This guy can play a little bit of guard. He can play both tackle spots. You see him do a variety of things. Throw it to his bowl game from the 2019 season. You see him playing right tackle, one of several spots he can play. Pass set. takes care of his guy. Not anything super impressive, but you can see he's got the angles. One thing people love to say about Slater is he is a technician. He is refined. He is ready to go, like Kyle said. I think you can plug him and play him. Again, another spot from the right tackle spot. Works with his guard in conjunction to work against the pass rusher. Ball gets out. He can handle pass pro. And this one is what gets me really excited because we see him kick over to right guard. Basic run play, nothing that's going to get you too excited, but he's got the athleticism and the angle to seal off his man, spring his running back to the second level. What we don't have is tape of him playing left tackle, but I promise you he can do it. I think one thing that really spiked his draft stock this year is the fact that he played left tackle against Ohio State's own Chase Young. Might remember him as Washington's Defensive Rookie of the Year. Handled himself quite well. The only question for me is if this guy's even available at number 10 because he is that good of an offensive lineman prospect.
The Cowboys signed Dak Prescott to a 4-year deal this offseason. Prescott's here through 2024. Ezekiel Elliott is here through 2025. Dave, this is an injury-prone offensive line. Knowing that, and knowing the new deals that Prescott and Elliott have, how should the Cowboys draft an offensive lineman in terms of long-term protection and success in the run game?
It is one of the iffiest and most interesting questions facing this team.
Why I asked it.
I know, and look, if Tyron and Lyle are healthy and playing, they are one of the top duos in the NFL. Can you count on that, though? Tyron has missed games with injury in 5 straight seasons going all the way back to 2016. Lyle, it's just one season that he's really had the problems, but a hip injury for an offensive lineman is kind of scary. So is it an immediate need if those guys are healthy? Absolutely not, but do you want to bank on that? Do you want to bank on undrafted free agents and journeymen having to start lots and lots of games? So I'm not convinced it's a top 10 need, but if a guy like a Rashawn Slater or a Penei Sewell is there for you, I understand why people are thinking that way.
We just saw an eye roll from Kyle. So Kyle, you disagree with Dave, I
So
assume.
it's not an eye roll per se, because I don't think, I agree with Dave's assessment there that it may not be a top 10 need, but it's definitely a need, I think, whenever it comes to the offensive tackle spot, because of course, like you mentioned with Tyron Smith, not only has he missed a ton of games and he only played 2 in 2020, he's missed 26 games in the past 5 years. This isn't the Tyron Smith of old that you can rely on him to be there week in and week out. I think he's still a great player. He's still got some left in the tank, and hopefully he's available, but that's the thing. You can't rely on hope. That is a terrible strategy, especially when you've invested so much in this offense with the receivers, with Dak Prescott, with Ezekiel Elliott, who are going to be around for quite some time. This is a position of need that the Cowboys need to address, and I think if you're going to address it, you can't necessarily do that later in the draft. It's got to be right up there at the top.
Okay, but Kyle,
I'm saying it's got to be at the top.
But Kyle, you have Tyron, you have Lyle. I understand they have their issues. They signed Ty and Secchi in free agency.
Doesn't get me excited, Dave.
No, it doesn't. It shouldn't get you excited. But you're covering yourself. You have Brandon Knight and Terrence Steele, who both had to play a lot of games. They were thrown into the fire.
And improved.
That is 3 veteran guys that can help you. And then now we're talking about your buddy Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame, Alex Leatherwood out of Alabama, who I absolutely love.
Yeah.
What about Samuel Cosme, the Texas tackle down 3 hours south of here in Austin? There are guys you can get later on to help cover yourself. I'm just not convinced it's a top 10 need. It is a need. You're right. Top 10, kind of rich.
I just really like Rashawn Slater.
I know you.
And
I do too.
You showed me a minute ago, once again, the versatility. If you think about the options that you would have if he's a part of your offensive line with Smith, Slater, Biotish, Martin, and then Collins, you're going to run for 1,500 yards. You're going to throw for 4,000 yards. It's going to be fantastic.
Let's
all party and just pick
If
Rashawn
he's the
Slater.
pick, I won't be mad about it.
Okay.
But a lot of other needs on this team.
You're very right.
You guys bring up a lot of good points. There's also a lot more touched on leading up to the draft. In the official draft magazine, Kyle, what can fans find in that magazine and how can they get their hands on one?
Well, you can find mock drafts from both David HELMAN and then the entire crew at DallasCowboys.com. You can find 88 scouting profiles, pros, cons, overviews, comparisons over all of the best draft prospects, including Rashawn Slater and why he should be a Dallas Cowboy.
Oh, we can't go more into that to discuss it, Kyle. That'll do it for an offensive lineman edition of Building the Board. For Kyle Yeomans and David Hellman, I'm Danny Surratt. Thanks for tuning in.